Very well. In order to be original, I'm going to speak once again about the future. But this is not just any moment. 30 years is nothing, says the tango. But 30 years ago, we were installing the first GeneXus. So the dream was bringing in more dreams. We had managed to build the product, and we had even managed to sell it. And then we realized we had to learn another language. The language of technology, in which we didn't feel that comfortable, but then other phrases appeared in our world, like a responsibility or accountability vis-a-vis what our clients do. Maintenance, support, coaching. A lot of words that were not in our vocabulary, and we learned them little by little. And one thing we learned in particular was that the customers want solutions with no excuses. That problems are solved by solving them with actions, never with words. If we don't solve the customer's problems, any explanation we can give them is superfluous. And I think that we have learned this well. And we have learned other things, that for a research group, for technology that is state-of-the-art, at the vortex of technology and science, sometimes there are things that are difficult to understand. For example, we do things well, and we do them better. Is it so? Or maybe someone else does it better? In a certain manner, there was a rule that we established. It is necessary to make all we cannot buy. If we can buy it, we don't need to do it. Probably those who made it are specialists. And we will have to travel a long way until we get to the same level. And besides, resources are not infinite, and it's human resources that are not limitless. So it's not a question of costs, it's a question of opportunity cost, which is much more important. So it can be a very good solution to buy something and not make it. And that's how we've been working. At the time, we had a Spartan product. Very Spartan would say some, yes, but it did what was essential. And we always bet on what was essential. And doing this, I faced some existential issues, especially when I was preparing this talk. especially after being abroad for 4 months. It seemed to me that it was not easy to prepare this talk. And when I started watching Nicolas' presentation and Gaston's and Armin, I said, what am I going to talk about? They have said everything, and much better than what I could say. So I'm going to try not to speak about technology, because we have been speaking about technology during 3 glorious days. So let's try talking about other things that are beyond technology, things that are much more permanent than technology. It's fantastic when we manage, when you launch a big system or a small system. 30 years later, that thrill is still the same. What is very clear is that at that moment, we have not reached heaven yet. You never do. You have to win heaven every single day. That is to say, our success cannot be assessed, or at least it cannot be assessed only by the quality of our technology and our systems. Our success is better measured when we think about our customer success. About 9,000 customers at the moment. And we have amongst us 33 countries that are present here, but it's 50 countries, more or less, that we serve, with a community that backs us and pushes us and forces us to be better. And that community comprises 150,000 people who carry out their professional activities throughout the world around GeneXus. So the dream was beautiful, and we are thinking of a happy ending, but there are no happy endings. There is the future. That is why I have named this presentation The Future. But what is the future? Well, firstly, the future is the present. If there is no present, if we don't have successes now and here, there's no possibility of having success in the future. The future. Some people have told me, what an old product, so many years. I would say fantastic, this many years. How many software companies have managed to exist for 30 years with a good level of success? I would say that very few, big and small. And how many products are still leaders 30 years later? Sometimes we are presumptuous and we would say, no one, just GeneXus. But imagine I didn't say it. Why GeneXus? Why GeneXus? Because is GeneXus a product? It started as a dream. It became a very strong theory that is out there in the vortex between pure science and technology. And as such, it's positioned above all technologies at another level. And that is why we can do things we thought the first day that no one else could do in the future. Or in the conceivable future. For example, automatic maintenance of systems. 30 years later, we are still the only ones to do it. Very often, when I read the publicity of our possible competitors, and when I look for competitors because it would favor us to have competitors, when we were digging a little deeper beyond the surface, well, we would see that automatic maintenance was and is not done by anyone, and that systems have to be future-proof. It's only those that are made with GeneXus, at least in the planet, that are future-proof. So, once again, I'm very happy 30 years later. I would like to devote a few words to continue with what I said at the end in my presentation of last year. Most of you who are here were here too last year. I will speak to your conscience. Everybody speaks about artificial intelligence. Everybody. There are mountains and floods of ink written about it, but very little is done. Why? Because the technology is not there? No, that's not true. The technology is there. But the problem is that it's not a question of technology. I was saying on that occasion that there are just a few big corporations that did the research on deep learning, which is the big battle horse of artificial intelligence. Google, maybe Amazon, but I have my doubts. Microsoft, IBM, SAP, and some anonymous companies, or at least they were anonymous companies last year in the Chinese world, but they are becoming less and less anonymous. These companies domesticated the algorithms, and now we can use those algorithms in a relatively easy manner and with relatively low cost, but only relatively. In fact, it is too complex to work with the hot softwares that the big players provide us with. And then I wanted another layer. Those of us who are domesticators, who take a technology, or tamers, who take a technology and manage to take it to a situation in which the user, the developer, don't need to know some very complex things that are solved by us for them and can use them immediately. And I said that the dimension of the company in that case was not important. You could think that in the world there could be several thousands of companies that did that. And I made a forecast. And I think that at the beginning we were about 200. But the number is much lower. I was wrong. But the match is not played in any of these two courts. The match is played in the home of Mr. Client. The customer is not concerned about technology, and customers don't live for technology like we do. They will be interested in technology and artificial intelligence in particular if they get some advantage for their business, something that can be measured in dollars or pesos. Well, we have made some progress, and I have great faith in the sub-community of GeneXus, which is the community of developers who work apart from the customers, because that's their business, but it goes slowly. And then some subterfuges appear. For example, human resources are not sufficient. This is the most traditional and most fantastic argument, because human beings, when we have an excuse that justifies that we don't do something, we feel very happy and don't do it. With Mariano de la Rola, for example, last year, we pushed the idea that young people should program. And I had my doubts about it. I cannot force someone who doesn't want to learn to learn. But I cannot train people and force entrepreneurs to hire them. There are entrepreneurs who say all day that human resources are not enough, and we are offering them the human resources, but they say, no, that's not what I wanted. And with Mariano, we became very cross. But now we got used to it, and we will continue doing the same thing. What does it mean that there are no human resources? In my company, I have the best human resources of the planet. And I have never had a problem. So, what's the story behind it? You have to hire well. You have to train. If you think that someone who has a university degree has finished studying, well, whoever says that is crazy. It is necessary to continue studying to keep up to date. And this is an endless task. In the case of Uruguay, things are not in black and white as Uruguayans usually think. there are some elements that distort things. For example, there's no entry exam or quotas for the university, which is the case for most universities in the world outside of Uruguay. And we see that people try not to study engineering and prefer to study laws or psychology or sociology, although they don't have the slightest idea whether they will be able to earn their keeping with that degree. And what can we do? Can we force them to study if they don't want to? Well, that's not useful. Maybe we have not been good enough encouraging people with positive stimuli, because negative stimuli are never good. So there is a problem, but what's the solution? Now we are going to have elections, and hopefully there will be people that will solve these problems. But once again, taking the proposals made by all of you, I see that everybody is offering more of the same. More schools, more professors, more hours of class, more budgetary resources. But I don't see anybody who thinks we are going to make a big change. We will put the student at the center of education. If I, politician, was suggesting this, I would lose the elections. So the big solution is to change the focus. To focus on the student and not the professor. And to end the traditional classroom. I liked to teach, but nowadays we think that that's ridiculous. Classes have to be recorded. What's the purpose of a professor as I was with a lot of experience? Well, the purpose of a professor like that or a teacher is to discuss with the young guys and give them orientations, but not to show them one after the other what things are like. But this comes from the Middle Ages and has not changed almost anywhere in the world. In GeneXus, we offer our own solutions. We say, well, you don't have the resources. You don't have enough resources. But if you use GeneXus in a reasonable way, you will be able to increase your productivity by 500% at least. And if you use it very well, the increase in productivity will be 10 to 1. Now, if you don't use it well, for example, you solve all of the problems firstly on paper, and then when you have a data model and you have determined the systems, subsystems, etc. on paper, you go to GeneXus and use it as a programming tool. Maybe the increase in productivity will be negative. But whoever uses it well, like Mariano de la Robla, whoever uses it well, will have a very significant increase in productivity. Now, figures are always difficult to estimate, but I would say that in our community, at the moment, there are several customers whose systems amount to around 50 million code lines. Is this a magical number? Well, no, it's a quota. No one can make by hand a system of that size. NASA, nor anyone else. So I have several of them. I have identified several of them, and I would like to name them, but I can't because they are big multinational corporations that won't allow me to name them. I would need their written consent. Among them, in particular, and I won't say the name, there is a huge multinational corporation located in Brazil with Japanese capitals, which is around that threshold. And closer to us, we have Ban Total, the leader of banking systems in the continent, which is also at the same level. So the excuse, I don't have the human resources, please don't use it any longer. And what can we say about technology that hasn't been said? I would say that there are some technological requirements. For example, systems are getting bigger and more complex. And they need to be increasingly efficient and easy to use. But there's no magic here. We will have to coexist with the old systems. And no one will save us in the future of non-stop systems, because this is what reality requires. It's not capricious. It's not out of the goodness of our hearts. It's a requirement of reality. The technological map is chaotic. There's all sorts of things out there. If I want to work in a traditional manner, my staff will have to be proficient in many of these things. Not me, of course. I'm not claiming to be. And if I look at some of these things, there has been a big discussion between proprietary and non-proprietary systems. And who won and who lost? It was a draw, a tie. But the arguments have worked against those who argued them. For example, in order to talk about open systems, the big argument was that they could be customized according to your need. In your house, you can change whatever you want. Yes, you can, but then it won't work. You hire someone, and you have freedom. Whose freedom? Big corporations like Microsoft or GeneXus. Reliable people. People who make standard things, the same thing for all users. And anybody can maintain them. But this creates dependence on the people who has modified the systems in order to create subsystems. So the result is, what is the penetration of Unix in the personal market? About 0%, much less than 1%. But on the other hand, what happens with the servers? Well, servers are all Unix and more and more. So when you're going to use something as it is without modifying it, it's a very good option to have open systems. But when you're going to modify them a lot, what a bad solution. Another thing on which a lot of time has to be spent, too much, is SQL or not. There would be systems to manage databases, no, data languages. And in this case, the SQL really wins. And the other one that has won is the HTML, which is a big winner and will continue to be. On the other hand, there are subsystems, and we have all been reluctant to use them at the beginning, but they're helping us a lot. For example, React, Angular, Vue, SAP U5. And our Angular generator is entering into beta because the performance will improve for web applications and the leap will be gigantic. Milano said it, but I will repeat it and I will emphasize it. Now, there are other things that concern me much more. Among these new technologies, some are moving. Some die. And my concern is the ones that die and are not bird. In this community, there are users. And we have done our best so that they can be convinced that they have to move to other technologies, but we cannot do much more. For example, Fox Pro, a programming language for the web. How long has it been obsolete? 20 years. VB, more or less the same. And one that is much more dangerous, Internet Explorer 4, 5, 6. That is to say, the old browsers. Well, you cannot continue using that. You can't, because they're not going to function anymore. You know that they don't have any support. But the big difference between the old ones and the new ones, besides, is that the new ones have a tremendous JavaScript machine. And everything that we're doing uses these JavaScript machines. So if you want to continue using them, well, that's where you remain. And believe me, there are still customers that are using GeneXus 7 or 8 or 9. and that is totally ridiculous. Please, this is a call to your conscience.
Podríamos seguir con una amable conversación.
So, I would like to continue this nice chat for 1 more hour. I don't know how I'm doing with regard to time, but I don't care much either. So, my friends, what is clear is that we need to make more efficient things, and this is what we are doing. From the point of view of GeneXus, I don't say that the task has been completed, because that's never the case, but we have indeed progressed a lot. And it's easier to use GeneXus. It becomes easier and easier. And that's the way we're going. But what's fundamental in failure or success is not in my home, it's in your home. So please cooperate, because there's a big opportunity out there. Thank you very much.